Hello, my name is Gene Montrastelli, and I am the editor of TappingQA.com. And the video that you are about to watch is an interview that I did as part of the 24 Hours of Tapping. The 24 Hours of Tapping was a free event, which was a fundraiser for the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network provides training and trauma relief tools to those in war-torn countries, as well as working with refugees all over the world. They've been able to help out over 200,000 people all over the world. After you watch this video, if you find this video something that was useful, the very easy way that you can say thank you to the guest for giving their time and sharing their expertise is to go to 24hoursoftapping.com/support and make a small contribution to support the Peaceful Heart Network. Again, that is 24hoursoftapping.com/support, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Our next fabulous speaker is our dear friend, Steve Wells. Steve is a leadership coach, a peak performance consultant from Perth, Western Australia. He is a pioneer in energy psychology and has been teaching and researching energy psychology techniques for the past 25 years. He conducted the first randomized control of EFT for treating a specific phobia. Steve is the co-creator with Dr. David Lake, of the Simple Energy Technique, oftentimes referred to as SET, and the Provocative Energy Technique, PET, and the developer of intention tapping. He is the author of 100% Yes, The Energy of Success, and he's the co-author of 5 books. And so what we're going to do right now is we get an opportunity to hear Steve share his experience of intention tapping, how he came up with it, and we're going to do a demonstration for you right now so you can take this amazing tool set that a number of our speakers have referenced so far in the last 20 hours or so and see how you can add it to your stuff. So here is my conversation with Steve Wells. Steve, thanks for joining me. I was actually thinking a little bit earlier today, the last time and the only time you and I were in the exact same place is we were standing in an airport that was missing a wall, and that was not part of its design, that there was this giant wall missing as we got a chance to do some work together in the Philippines. And it just like made me smile that was the one time that we got to give each other a hug and say hi to each other in person, was in that odd space.
All too brief, I'm afraid.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for your time today. You and I have had a conversation about this before. And when you proposed this to be the topic, I was super, super excited about it. So for the uninitiated, what is intention tapping? How did you come to it from the other tapping work that you were doing? Let's just start with a little background and then we'll dive in how to apply it and that sort of stuff.
Okay. So, of course, everybody who's listening knows tapping. Yep. Because they're all from the tapping world. So I always say we because my good friend, Dr. David Lake, he and I spent about 20 years traveling around together and developing stuff together. And some of the stuff that he and I developed jointly, I use in intention tapping. Okay. So, we had met Gary Craig. David had had his public speaking phobia cured by Gary. And then I invited David to join me in running workshops. And we were, at that time, Gary was giving EFT away and saying, hey, teach it to people and spread the word. Mm-hmm. And we started doing that and we started traveling and then we started developing our own innovations, innovations and differences. We questioned whether some of the parts were needed, whether you really needed to use setup statements, whether you really needed to use reminder phrases. It made more sense to us just to allow the person to focus on whatever they were aware of. If you have a feeling in your body, you don't have to say this feeling in my body to know that you're having a feeling in your body. So, we put this together and initially we were calling it EFT. And then after a conversation with Gary, I said, okay, we're going to call it something different because, he and we agreed that it was, what we had developed was just getting more and more different from standard EFT. So we called that Simple Energy Techniques because it was a simplification. We had eliminated some parts of what seemed to be required in EFT, but just didn't. And some other things were discovered, like David discovered when he was working with trauma clients that if he got more tapping rounds in a session, he got better results with those clients And then he thought, why stop tapping? So the concept of continual tapping came out of that. And so, you know, simple energy techniques became essentially continual tapping. We also discovered energy toning, where you, if you do tapping each day, whether or not you're focusing on your problems, things can get better. And so we started encouraging our clients just to tap without having to think about it, without having to be clever or psychological and all that stuff. And so continual tapping, energy toning, these are features of the simple tapping that we developed. And really for me, like when David went up and got his public speaking phobia cured with Gary, he said, you know, I had this feeling in my stomach my whole life that just a little bit on edge. And he said, I thought it was hardwired into the human nervous system, because everybody kind of said, yeah, I have that too. He said, that went away and it's never come back. I'm like, well, mine hasn't gone away. I still have this, you know, because I had anxiety my whole life. It wasn't until I started doing daily tapping, of enough tapping, that the kind of stress came down to a sufficient level. I reset my, if you like, my set point for anxiety using SET, you know, simple energy techniques. And that was when I started to experience real relief. You know, I'd had used it on some things and got relief. And then just the continual tapping on a daily basis to tone and tune my energy just brought down the excess stress maybe. And now I just see it as a form of emotional fitness. So that became part of my practice. So,
and before you begin, I want to stick a pin in that particular thing, because I have found the exact same thing, that every morning, 5 to 10 minutes, set a timer, and just tapping without words is such an amazing table setter for the day. And like the most common question I get at the website Tapping Q&A is, what are the phrases I use for blah, blah, blah? And it's just like, relax. Let you just start and just tap. Just start there, and then we'll figure out the more sophisticated thing. So I didn't want to lose that point, because I think it's really important for folks that are sophisticated tappers who are trying to learn more and do better. Like, the points themselves are enough lots of the time, and we just need to be reminded of that over and over again.
Well, and because people get obsessed with, I've got to find the core issues and I've got to find the specific events and all this kind of stuff. And really, you know, we found people, if they did the daily tapping and they did enough of it, some of them, their problems just went away without ever finding the core issue or, you know, being specific. And so not that being specific is bad. Being specific can be really good. And also, you know, what we call, you know, so mindfully tapping is good. Mindless tapping can be good too. So these were features of the simple tapping that we developed, and we were teaching this. And of course, we developed some other innovations, our provocative energy techniques, where we combine it with a provocative style and paradoxical approaches from paradoxical therapy and so on. And then maybe it's, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago now, I was just having a really bad time. I had this heel spur, and it was really frustrating because I just got back to doing, like, okay, I'm going to get back to running, like not running really. I call it jogging, like, you know, cross between a jog and a walk, you know. So, but longer distances. And I got up to, like, I'd done a 28-kilometer one, and then I got this heel spur and I couldn't move, and I was in pain and agony every time I touched my foot to the ground. So I was just basically stuck in a chair a lot of the time. And you know how it is when you get one thing, everything kind of happens. And so I was like, well, you know, these things are going wrong in my business, and I'm not really moving forward in the way I want, and I'm not really being a good enough father, and I'm not a good enough husband. And I just, you know, got really down. So I started tapping, and I started doing everything that I knew. I'm using all the techniques I know to resolve these issues. And, you know, including TRE, which is a shaking technique developed by Dr. David Baselli, logosynthesis developed by Willem Lammers from Switzerland. And I was getting into some non-duality stuff. And my marketing coach at the time, Robert Middleton, had written a book called The Unstuck Process, based on some non-duality teachers, and Byron Katie. So I'm like, oh, yeah, I know Byron Katie. I'd read her book, and Loving What Is, which is just a brilliant book. Anyway, I picked up this book and I'm reading it, and this phrase just jumped out at me. It's not the thought. It's the attachment to the thought that causes the suffering. And I'm like, yeah, I know this. Like, because in tapping, you can have a thought that upsets you. You do the tapping, and now you have the same thought, and it doesn't upset you. So the emotion attached has released. Okay. So tapping releases emotional attachments. But what was different this time was I just had this insight, like, what if we could just use intention? And we've been trying, I've tried to use intention a million times, affirmations and, prayers and wishes and you name what else, goals and I'm gonna this, whatever. And, none of that really worked consistent, not like this, because in that moment, I just formed the simple intention. I release all my emotional attachments to this problem. And I just felt like I'm feeling now, like even just doing it, I just went, oh. And, you see this when people do tapping, you get a big release. Okay? Yep. When you've tuned into an issue and the tapping is working for you, you get big yawn, big sigh, big release. And I felt one of the biggest releases I'd had from doing tapping, just from, I wasn't tapping at the time. I just was using intention. And then I did it again on another aspect of the problem. And I'm like, oh, and it's like, it happened again. And then I just found another part of the problem. And because, like parts of the problem is like, well, yeah, what about this part of it? Your mind is like, well, yeah, you think you're over it. What about this? I'm like, and so I'm like, okay, I release all my emotional attachments to this. And I'm like, oh. And then the mind is like, what about this? And I just did it and did it. And did it. Each time it worked. And then I became aware of this tightness in my chest. And I'm like, yeah, of course, there's always an energy disturbance. It's a two-part process. Mind and body are one system, right? So, of course, you can be aware of, what it seems to be the mind, but actually there's a body component. And we know in tapping that there can be a disturbance in flow. And so when you do tapping, you restore the energy flow to the area where the disturbance is. And same thing, I had this insight. What if we could just use intention? So I'm like, okay, I restore the right energy flow to my chest. Big, deep breath, just spontaneous, like expansion. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, well, this is, and now the first thought I had was like, this can't be real. I must be talking myself into this. Yeah. This is just crazy.
Anytime it is too good to, it feels too good to be true. That now is our immediate is it's a fluke. It's just a moment. Yeah, it didn't actually happen. Yeah.
So anyway, but then every time I did it, it worked again and again and again. So, and I just like, okay, so I've now, and those two statements have become the core of what I now use in intention tapping. Now, at the time, I wasn't using tap. I was just getting these releases just from intention. Never had that before. Never. Not like that. And then I'm like, okay, let's just try this. And I went to my wife and I said, I've just been playing around with this thing. I just wonder, if you might want to have you got any problems you want to try it on? And she's like, yeah. Because she's willing to, because over the years, she's,
right,
on board tapping and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really helped her. And so she had a problem with, I can't remember what the problem was. And I just said, okay, say this. I release all my emotional attachments. And she just goes, ah. And I'm like, okay, 2 out of 2. Next morning, I'm talking to my mate from Sydney. We're on Skype and he's got a family meeting issue and is concerned about this issue with a member of the family. And I said, mate, just try this. I release all my emotional attachments to this. And he's like, wow, he said, that was palpable. He like felt the difference. And he went and had the family meeting and the problem was resolved without the stress and angst. So I'm like, okay, that's 3 out of 3. It's not just something I made in my mind. And so then I started experimenting with it, and it worked again and again and again. I shared it with my friends, with my clients, and with my colleagues. And now it's become a thing. And of course, then I started combining tapping with it.
Yep.
So the process I developed, I called it intention-based energy process. You know, I wish I had come up with something like Sedona method or some really clever thing, but it's just like, I just call it what it is. It's intention-based and it's an energy process. So that's what I call it, IEP. And YEP, we call it YEP, you know, because I do 100% yes. So it's like YEP, okay? And then when I combine it with tapping, I call it intention tapping, because the tapping does something else.
Right.
You know, there's other intention-based techniques out there, like Willem Lammer's, I believe his logosynthesis is an intention-based technique. And he doesn't believe in tapping anymore. We met him at Gary Craig's workshop, and he doesn't use tapping because he gets shifts using his intentional approach. But I combine it with tapping and I get better results. I find that the tapping harmonizes something in the mind-body system. And you can just tap and you can get results. You can use just intention, you can get results. And you can combine these two things. And the distinction here, and this is really important, is that this is not the type of intentions like affirmations. Right. And the reason why I think it works is because it's always good for you. So I believe that when you set one of these intentions, you're giving a direction, not to your subconscious mind. Everybody's talking about reprogram the subconscious, reprogram the subconscious. All right, well, I believe conscious mind, the aware part. Subconscious is like all your beliefs that you've developed, your program learnings, your habits. And then I believe there's a unconscious. So conscious mind is the bit of the iceberg above the water. Subconscious is the big bit of the iceberg under the water. Unconscious is the ocean. Okay. And that's you know, this, I believe our connection to the universe, God, spirit, universal life force, whatever. But you could just call it your wise part, the higher self, if you want. Unconscious mind, I like. Because, you know, in studying Milton Erickson's work, where he did trance work with people, he would sometimes communicate with this part. And the unconscious mind would say, she's not ready to hear that yet, you know?
Yeah.
In trance, the person's unconscious is saying, she's not ready to hear that yet. So it's like this part that's looking after you is not going to let you get too overwhelmed by everything.
Right.
So, and based on, you know, what's happened to you and all the trauma you've gone through and so on, it's like, okay, you can't release all of that in one go. So, you know, yes, if you have an issue, you know, with your mother, you can say, I release all my emotional attachments to my mother. What happens is your unconscious mind starts that program running, or starts releasing that for you, starts releasing that program, all the crap that you've got connected to the issues with your mother. But it doesn't do it all at once, because you just couldn't handle that. You know, like you want to have cosmic truth hit you all at once about everything. You know, I think this is what happened to Byron Katie. She woke up one day and she was like, you know, just had everything had transformed, and she no longer was what she believed herself to be.
Right.
But she was really hard to deal with for everybody as well, you know, like, because everyone else is living in the world. Okay.
Right.
And they've got all these things that they've all built up, and she's like, oh, we don't function according to that anymore. So she's wandering into people's houses and, you know, going wherever because it's all free and open and whatever. So anyway, I think your unconscious is looking after you all the time. It keeps your heart beating. It regulates your body functions. And it also looks after you, you know, socially, emotionally, psychologically. And if you give it a request, it will carry out that request, you know. And I know, you know, Sandy Radomski and Tom Altaffer, I think it's Tom, developed, you know, ask and receive. It's a similar concept. It's like, you know, you ask and you receive. So you can start, though. The good thing about intention tapping is, like, so in regular tapping, you've got to be specific and you've got to find specific events. The good thing about this is we don't have to do this. We trust the unconscious to do the work. So we just start with whatever we're aware of. So like something's irritating me about my mother. Okay, I release all my emotional attachments to my mother. Okay, well, that in traditional EFT, that's not specific enough, right? It should be, I release, you know, this specific incident with my mother when I was 12, when I was in the, you know, coming in the, out of my bedroom and she yelled at me, whatever. Okay, that specific stuff. Well, we're going to have to find that because the unconscious will give it to us if it's needed. Okay. Because we're just going to follow the energy and emotion. So you start with whatever you're aware of. If you're aware of a feeling, then you go, okay, I restore the right energy flow to this feeling. Now, I've developed a few additional things. It might be flow, it might be balance, it might be flow and balance. Okay. So, but generally, you know, the two main ones that I mentioned, releasing emotional attachments, restoring energy flow, that's where it's at most of the time. And even now, years later, I still use that over and over and over again. The difference is the target. So I say, okay, I release all my emotional attachments to my mother, and I'm just tapping while I do that. And now I'm just waiting and noticing. So I just keep tapping, and now the next aspect will come up. So now I remember that look she had in her, oh, that look. And so now I can say, I release all my emotional attachments to this. You know? I didn't even have to use the words because I've got the image there. But if I wanted to, I could say I release all my emotional attachments to that look, you know. And of course, when you're working with someone, it's good to be able to communicate what you're seeing and all that stuff. But when you're using for yourself, you don't have to use the words, you know, that look on my mother's face when she was in the bath. If you've got an image of her, you know, in the bathroom with that face, you can just say, I release all my emotional attachments to this. Keep tapping and let it do what it does and just notice what's happening mind-wise, what's happening body-wise. And usually what happens is if people are very mind-identified, they release a few emotional attachments and then they come into their bodies. And then they start to become aware of what's going on in the body, and then they can go, oh, it's my throat. Okay, I restore the right energy flow to my throat. Don't try and make it do something. This is a difference between these intentions and affirmations. Affirmations, you're trying to force it. You're trying to attach to something that you don't have a current attachment to. And in fact, you have an attachment to the opposite. So you're actually being pulled over here and you're trying to push it over there. Okay. And so that's what the challenge is.
Yeah, and you say that. I think of my Buddhism professor in college who talked about this idea that you detach, insight comes in, and so what's your first thing you do? You immediately reattach to the new insight. And then you have to detach, and it comes. And so there is this constant battle of the, and I think you're hitting on it right with that because the subconscious mind is just trying to keep us safe. And the way it keeps us safe is by doing the thing that is understandable and predictable. And so when there's a piece of information, it's like, what's the cause and effect? What's going on here? What's the story? What's the, like we as creatures have spent thousands and thousands of years mastering cause and effect. There's footprints over there. There's a fuzzy thing with teeth. I'm going this way. So we match the world. And so giving ourselves permission not to do any of that as we're doing a process like this and just saying, it's there, I let it go. You can let your mind
do it. You can let your mind do it. And then everything, I just say everything that comes up, sacrifice all of it on the altar of releasing. That's what I say. So, okay, this thought comes up. Let's test it. Okay, let's see. Because you're never going to lose anything good. Okay, even your good things, like the only way I got my book written and published was releasing I had actually a coach help me, and she's like, what has to happen for you to get this book published? I was like, oh, it has to be worthy. She's like, Steve, how committed are you to this book having to be so worthy? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm emotionally attached to this concept of worthiness.
Yeah.
But after the coaching session, I sat down and did some intention tapping. I released all my emotional attachments to worthy. And now I call this now the super positive projection, right?
Mm-hmm.
The super positive projection stops people from doing things all over the world, you know, because it has to be so profound. It has to be the mega bestseller. It has to be so wonderful. It has to be perfect. And when I released that, I was able to put an imperfect book out into the world that never would have got out into the world ever. It had been 10 years, that book, okay? People say, how long did it take you to write a book? 10 years. No, it takes you 2 or 3 weeks to write a book, and 10 years to get over yourself.
Right. And I think the other piece of that is like this super good, this worthiness. I think particularly when we get to something like a book, which is your work, which you believe in, and then it's not just about the book being worthy, it's about you being worthy, because so much of your heart and soul, and like, you know, I work with transformational professionals all of the time who are doing this work as avocation. They're doing this work as calling, and they invest so much of themselves into it, which makes putting themselves out there scary.
You're emotionally attached to it. Okay. Well, you know what? Release all of it. Let it all go. And then, because then I was like, okay, I was, if you like, put back in touch with the purpose, which was to get this out into the world to help people. So it got out into the world, and it's helping people. And, you know, it's still selling 10 years later, 12 years later. You know, it's good. Yeah. So, even cherished beliefs that I had about myself, even things that I had about myself that I thought were self-evident, and they weren't necessarily just, you know, they're not problems. It's just the way I am.
Yeah.
Some of that's gone now for me. Like, you know, I tell people, my whole life, it took me half an hour to an hour to get to sleep. It's just the way it was. And, you know, I would always just say, like, my wife, you know, she'd say, oh, what do you think about this? And I'd say, oh, I think this. What do you think? And she'd go, because that's how she sleeps. She just drops off to sleep, right? Whereas I would be, yeah, well, okay, fine for you. I just have to lie here like I always do. My whole life, never saw it as a problem. It was just like people say, I'm a morning person, I'm an evening person. No. Well, really? Let's see. Because when you release your emotional attachments to it, it may be BS. It may be belief systems, and it may be, you know, the brown stuff as well, because it really is. I just was awake in the middle of the night one night, and I was using this intention tapping on every thought that was stirring me up. I released emotional attachment, and then I just dropped off to sleep in about 3 minutes. Next night, as I was going to sleep, I noticed some of these worries coming in. I noticed did the same thing, and I dropped off to sleep in 2 minutes. Ever since then, I have become a person who falls asleep in 2 or 3 minutes. Okay. Right. Meaning that thing I just thought was me, that was just the way it was, gone.
One of the things I've been wrestling with in my work and figuring out how to move forward is this idea that in order for us to change, we either need to change the way we see ourselves, the way we see the world, or the way we see both. Because we're stepping into, like, again, the subconscious mind likes the predictable. Well, I have this very specific idea of who I am in the world in different contexts. There is the professional gene, there's the teacher gene, there's the social gene, there's the dating gene, there's the inside of my family of origin gene, and like all of those things. And I'm generally pretty happy with who I am. I've done lots of work to do that sort of thing, but this is leaning directly into, like, I have a very specific attachment to how I see myself in this world, which is good, but it keeps me exactly right here. And it makes it impossible for me to go to the next thing.
All of that you had to set up in reaction or relationship to the world that you were born into, the family you were born into, the trauma you had to go through or whatever. And that was all survival method. And now just like someone who's come out of a war zone, you got to update their nervous system for them to realize that they're safe. Yep. And so you can live your whole life like that, still running the programs and beliefs that this is the way I am, this is my lot in life, and so on. You know, the tragedy of this world is that a lot of people are suffering trauma and they don't realize they can get over it. They can get out of it, but they can actually return to life. because I totally agree with you, like a change of perspective and stuff like that. But for years, I try to help people change perspectives with cognitive therapy by giving them the perspectives they should have, the rational, logical ones, and let's challenge your irrational beliefs. Now it's like, no, let's get all your irrational beliefs, let's get all your beliefs and just say, see if they are going to still be helpful by releasing your attachments to them. Anything that's good and you still need is going to be still there for you. You can always manifest that because you spent your whole life doing it if you want to. But actually, now you have all these things available.
I actually spent an entire calendar year one year carrying a big pink eraser like I had as a child. I think you might call it, I don't know if you call it rubber there, but just one of those erasers for your pencil stuff. And I carried it in my pocket. And every single time I reached into my pocket and touched it, it was a reminder to me, my work this year is just to let go of the things that are no longer useful, not put something new in, not change it from A to B, but just because the stuff that is who I am and who I'm supposed to be is here. There's just all of this muck and guck on the outside of it that's making it harder for me to be fully myself. And like you said, like that analogy you used in the beginning, to just like immerse completely in the ocean and access all of it. And literally, it was just a reminder, erase, erase, erase. That's all the work is. Just let it go, let it go, let it go.
You don't need to put more in. Just got to get the gunk out. It's all the stuff you believe that you're not and all the stuff that you believe that you are. It's the problem. So where I differ and where, now we have, this turned into a thing. So I have a certification program because of enthusiastic people who kind of pushed me down this track, really. And it's been so humbling. But now, we have practitioners in, I don't know, more than a dozen countries already, all over the world who are doing this. We have groups in French, and we'll have groups in Italy, and English-speaking practitioners, and ultimately, we've trained some people in Germany. We'll have some of that too. People all over the world who are doing it, but they're not. The point I was really going to make, rather than raving on about how wonderful the thing was, and see that I can still get attached to.
Absolutely, because we are human.
What I was really going to say was, we're not about reprogramming the subconscious to fix you by putting in a new program. We're just about releasing the programs that are there, and then that just allows an opening. Like you said, that opening comes up, the insight comes up, the good stuff comes out. Everything comes out of nothing. You open to the universe, and it will reveal itself to you, and it's all good.
And I think it's really liberating, because I think one of the as I've thought about taking action and self-sabotage over the course of the years, for me, there are 4 reasons why we don't take action. We don't know what we want. We don't know how to do it. It's painful to take action. It's painful to be successful. And there's practical and there's emotional components to that. But that first one's really interesting emotionally, where I don't know what I want. And if we don't know the direction we want to head, sometimes it can create a hesitation to do transformation, because it's I'm letting go of this thing, but where am I going? And what I like about this is a liberation from needing to have the next landing spot. It gives us the work is to let go, and the next step is going to present itself in a clear, obvious way for us to walk down that path. And we don't have to go, well, I'm at A and I want to get to B, and how do I emotionally get from A to B? It's I'm emotionally at A and that isn't necessarily serving me. Okay, great. Let's let go of the stuff that is no longer serving me. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, and now this is the direction I head as I'm stepping into this.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing like Michael Singer talks about, is just being open to what the world is putting in front of you for you to do, and doing that. So it's kind of like listening and noticing and seeing. I love the sky. I go out in the morning. It's nice now because it's a little darker over here. Okay, we just had the solstice, so it's going to start getting But I go out and I look at the sky, and like a lot of people don't know, I studied weather forecasting when I went to uni. I only did a course in it. I was studying psychology, but I did this weather forecasting. And the biggest thing I learned was look at the sky. just look at the sky, and then you can see. And so people are like, oh my gosh, how do you know that it's going to rain? It's like,
there's a cloud. Look at that. You can see it coming. Yeah.
Have a look, have a look. Is it wet? It might be raining. Okay,
that's right.
And so, yeah, it's just that openness. And I think so much of this cognitive stuff we've built up, we've gone away from our senses. We've gone away from just noticing. We've gone away from listening. And what I train practitioners is really just pay attention to the person. Just watch them and sense their energy. And we go with feeling energy. So as opposed to EFT, where we're looking for specific events and you're looking for, and sometimes you can get caught up in detail. We're just following the energy. So when the person speaks, it's like, where's the voice catching? What's the, what's happening in the body? Like, I can notice right now, this feeling over here. So as I do that, and that's in my body, all right, well, if I'm with you and I'm working with you, now it's like we're in interaction. So you're having a feeling, I've got mirror neurons. Maybe I'm feeling some of those feelings in my body. So I can use my body as a bit of a tuning fork, okay? The other thing is being aware of your own stuff as well. So our practitioners are always working on themselves. It's a constant process, so that, because you've got to get yourself out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've glanced off of the phrases and the structure of it in the narrative sense. So
reflecting, a moment ago, going, my God, the poor listeners, I was just like,
so let's do this. So just before we jumped on to do this little recording, I had a really difficult conversation with a friend who is really struggling right now. I would love to be able, just if you could lead me through the process right now as I think about this particular thing, and just so that we can, and all of you who are listening, along with us, find something that's there, and let's just walk through it real quick.
Let's do it. Well, first of all, there's tapping. Okay, so the process is, we teach people tapping first, and then we just have them tap continually. And you don't have to tap on the same points as me. You can just tap on points that feel right for you. And some people like to follow along, and some people don't. So, if people who are, who are watching want to follow along with tapping with me, I forgot to mention we also do tapping on the hands and fingers. I've got to find the camera here, and of course we use the finger points.
Yeah, the finger points.
And we also use tapping on using the thumb of the same hand to tap on the finger points.
I am a big fan of covert tapping in that particular way.
Yeah. So as long as you're tapping, the tapping is always happening. And sometimes we might tap and focus specifically, but we just have the continual tapping happening. And then we just focus on the issue. So what is it that you're aware of? What are you noticing? Is it a thought? Is it a feeling? Is it an image?
Yeah. So as I tune into it, there's just like this giant heaviness in my solar plexus in my stomach, kind of like this, oh, I can't believe my friend is going through this.
Okay. So we could do two things. We could focus on releasing attachments to the I can't believe, or we can restore energy to the, I'm going to go with the first one you mentioned and just say, I restore the right energy flow.
The right energy flow.
To my solar plexus.
To my solar plexus and stomach.
And just let it do whatever it does. And don't try and make it do anything. Just notice.
Yeah. And so it's still there, but it's lighter. It's lighter and it's a little warmer, but it's still there.
Yeah. Okay. And so this is normally what happens is that, of course, things move and shift and change just like they do with regular tapping. And we just notice what's next. So it's lighter and it's in the exact same area?
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm just going to bring in the balance statement here. Just say I restore the right energy balance.
I restore the right energy balance.
To my solar plexus and stomach.
To my solar plexus and my stomach.
Yeah. And see, even as you say that, there's a shift in breathing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can feel it in the whole body. I'm sure you can see it. And so it's now like a quarter of what it was in size, and it feels less dense, if that makes sense.
Okay. Now, since you mentioned your friend, and what I've noticed is when you have a lot of emotional attachments, you need to release some of those before you can get access to restoring the flow. Sometimes it's just like if there's all these, I'm going to call them mind things, but it's all the same system. So just keep tapping and just say, I release all my emotional attachments.
I release all my emotional attachments
to my friend's issues,
to my friend's struggles.
Yeah, and just let that do whatever it does, because you know, and your mind knows what that is, and your unconscious will just take that and do whatever's, give you whatever's next. And so all you have to do is notice.
Yeah, and it's still there, but there is, not only is there lightness in the place that it was showing up, but like I wasn't noticing the tension that I was carrying in my entire body because I was so focused there, but I can feel the lightness through the entire like almost like goosebumpy in some parts of the body as the lightness shows up.
Yeah, good. Okay. So you mentioned like the fact that your friend is struggling is really upsetting to you, right? And so you know, even the word struggles, I could feel that had a really strong energy to that. Okay. So when you think about this issue with your friend, what comes up? Just notice.
I just feel helpless because of the distance, and because even if I was there, there's nothing I could do about the particular circumstance.
Okay. So just say I release all my emotional attachments.
I release all my emotional attachments
to the helplessness.
To the helplessness.
And just let that do whatever it does. And
I can actually like feel myself like more erect as I sit here. And I think it's again a consequence of tension releasing, and so the body is just again returning to its natural posture. It's not like I'm like a soldier, but it's just like I just am like opening in that way.
Yeah, because your mind is always like, don't tell me helplessness. There's got to be a way to help. I've got to find a solution. I've got to fix this. I've got to resolve this. And it's something that your friend is having to go through. And that's the hard thing, is to be able to be outside of that and seeing that.
Yeah. Wow, that's magic. You know, as you know, really I've done this process before. I've been tapping for 17 years, and there's still these moments where we're just like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Like it just seems unreasonable.
Yeah, yeah. So they're just, you know, like, so aspects is the same concept that people use in tapping, and there's aspects. So the aspect of your friend suffering and having to see your friend suffer, that's hard. The helplessness is another aspect.
Yep.
You know, the feelings in the body and the location and the size of them and so on, they're all different aspects, and we still follow aspects, but we don't. We just follow them. We just allow them. We let them.
And I am like the biggest fan in the world of a tool that is simple. That just because something is complicated does not mean that it is better. Sometimes sophistication is necessary to solve some problems, but I love, like, it's the reason why now when I teach people tapping the very first time, I never teach them words, because I want it something that they're not confused when they walk away. I can tap without words. I just need to remember the points. That's it. And this is the exact same thing. Like, I just need a couple of phrases. And again, I can just say this. Like, I don't need to.
And in fact, I just teach my clients tapping first. And even if I might use the words with them, I say, no, all I want you to do is just tap every day. Just start with that. That'll make a big difference to your life for most people, you know, unless you're really severely depressed, or you're dealing with massive, severe mental health condition. You're going to notice a difference doing daily tapping. If you're having regular human problems, little d depression and so on, and even some big problems can start to shift. And then we teach them the intention statements, and then they can really go with it. But of course, it's like everything, you know. It looks simple, and then now with our practitioner training, people are saying, "Hey, can we do an advanced course, because we know how to go further." And it's like, I did this, and it worked really well for all of these people, and then I got stuck with this one. It's the same thing. Like,
of course, awesome.
Same thing with EFT. Same with intention tapping. You can,
awesome. Well, great.
You can learn the basics in 5 minutes. And then if you want to be, an expert, you go further.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so much for sharing all of this. For those of you who are watching and listening, go to intentiontapping.com and just check out the amazing resources. Steve, I appreciate the fact that you are constantly innovating and trying to find ways to make it simpler to share with everybody else. And so it's a real gift to the community. Thank you very much.